One of the beautiful things about being in the flow of the universe is to be in a space of allowing what is to come. And if you are already planning out A, B, C, D, all the way through Z, we've talked about this before, it leaves very little room for the universe to step in and give you something just deliciously beautiful. Welcome to the Akashic Recordings. I'm Annette Dalloo, Akashic conduit, channel, and spiritual guidance coach. I want to thank you for joining me today. The Akashic Recordings is created through the cooperation of my clients who have agreed to have their sessions recorded. Of course, with their permission, I am able to share these beautiful sessions with you. If you are interested in booking a session with me, you can go to my website at infinitesoullove.com. In today's episode, we're speaking with Taylor. Taylor has been working with music her entire life, and she's looking to have some guidance as to what role music has played, not only in her current life, but in her past lives, and what it pertains to in terms of her soul purpose. Some of the other subject matters that come up during the session have to do with living up to your own success, as well as finding proof of God. All right, so tell me what you would like to cover today.
It seems like a very large or powerful or big energy around music and creativity that is reemerging in my life. So I was interested from that point of understanding my soul's musical history.
Okay.
Or history with composition and music in general. I'm kind of curious about that, where I have felt connected to certain people's music, but also of a more musical life experiences that I've had. I sense that I've had many life experiences around music, and so I'm kind of interested to know more about that.
I'm going to actually open it up to the guides to lead us a little bit more into what might come through for you, because I have a tendency to not like to limit them as to what we're going to talk about. So we'll definitely touch on the music aspect, but I'm also going to open it up to whatever else they want to have come through.
I'm a big fan of following, not leading.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure exactly what they're showing me. They usually show me the heart like a garden, and I'm not seeing your heart like a garden at all. Typically what that means is that there is a blockage going on right now, and it is from a past life. That's why. So it's very shiny, and it's almost like glass around the heart. And the glass is almost black, almost like it's creating this barrier to prevent anybody from seeing in. Okay, so then I'm seeing like part of it being opened. So it's like you're being very meticulous about who you're letting see your full heart and who you're not. When there's somebody that you deem worthy, then you will open your heart to them, and then it closes back up again, and then you open it again. So it's like you're being very selective. And this is something that needs to be opened and need to be cleared. It is from a past life that we'll address. It is one thing to be careful and cautious and protect your energy, but it is another to remove your heart energy from even yourself, because when you close it off to other people, you're technically closing it off to yourself as well. So you get a lot of information. The thing that they're saying to me is that your crown is open and your third eye is interpreting it and seeing things, but then your brain is getting in the way sometimes. Basically what happens is that you get the information and you get the intuition, and your third eye is translating and is on board with everything. But then it's almost as if you fill in the blanks with your mind. So oftentimes what happens when we get our information is we get it in pieces, and we get it in various different periods of time when we're ready. And sometimes we get downloads when we don't need the information yet, and we need to wait until the information becomes pertinent. So there's all kinds of different layers that happen here. And they want you to make sure that you are just allowing the information to come, and don't worry about sort of jumping on it and trying to fill in the blanks, even if it doesn't make sense just yet, to just allow it to sit until it does make sense. I do see a blockage in your throat chakra as well. It's very solid and it's black. It's usually just an indication that it's old and that's from a past life. All right, so then let's let that energy land softly in your heart space, keeping us connected to that Gaia energy while we access the Akashic Records. I want to thank Akula, my Akashic guide. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Archangel Sanaphon and Archangel Metatron for being here as well. So we're going to explore the musical history that you've had first. They're saying it does pertain to your soul purpose to an extent. You have some of the information already. They want to fill in some of the things that you don't have yet. And they want to express to you about the emotions that you have felt over the course of the lifetimes as it pertains to how you transmute energy, how you move through the world, and how music is tied to that. How many lifetimes do we need to look at? 4. Okay, so let's take a look at the first lifetime we need to look at. Sound has always been part of your strength in your soul. Clairaudience is something that is intrinsic in your soul's path. It is something that you've always had. It is something that has been strong within you for a very long time. Even your human self can't mask that ability. The first thing I'm seeing is that you are a young man. You have brown hair. You're riding in a carriage. It's a black carriage. You have a very sort of nice suit on. It's got sort of pointed edges in terms of the shape of what you're wearing. I'm hearing a bird song in the trees, and it piques your interest to the point where you stop the carriage just to listen. And you stop and you listen to this bird song, and you record it in your mind. You take this sort of melody that you've created in this moment with this bird. You thank the bird for the song, and then you move forward. You take the music from each experience that you have in the world. It is like you are connecting to all of the different things in your atmosphere, in your environment. The sound of the wheels on the carriage, the clanging of a piece of metal on the hitch that is connecting the horses to the carriage that has come loose, that is hitting the piece of metal in a very rhythmic pattern. The sound of the wind, the sound of children's laughter. It's all an orchestrated symphony for you. And you can create anything from the things that you hear every day. You hear beauty in everything that there is. You hear sadness. You hear happiness. You hear joy. You hear anger. You hear all of the emotions. There are times that you wish you could shut it off. It's like a hyper focus that you have on your hearing, almost like having sonic ears. It's an amplification of the energy, of the sound that comes in through not only your ears, but your consciousness. And you're able to translate the energy of that particular sound. You had a lot of struggles in this particular lifetime because you heard the symphonies on the air and in the environment, and then you would get to your instruments and you would try to recreate these sounds and these resonances, and it just didn't work. There was nothing more perfect than nature. There was nothing more perfect than the sound of nature. And so to come home and have to play instruments that were a fake replica of what those sounds are fell flat. You loved playing the piano. You loved playing the violin. They were sounds in and of themselves, but they were not sounds of nature. You had a hard time reconciling that. The fact that you wanted to bring the sounds and the energy of nature into your music and you couldn't figure out how to do it. You would play the same notes that the bird would sing, but it would be different, flatter, less than. It wouldn't have the soul with it. It wouldn't have the connection. Part of the issue at that time in this lifetime was the fact that you weren't connecting to your own heart. You were trying to take one thing and translate it into another versus taking your experience of one thing, translating it through your heart space, your emotions, your soul, and then creating something new with that energy. The heart was the missing piece, and you spent an entire lifetime trying to figure that out. You were not particularly successful with your music in that lifetime. It became more of a hobby than anything else, simply because you couldn't figure out how to bridge that gap between what you knew to be true in your heart, what your experience was in nature, and have it come out into a creative expression of your own soul love. You got frustrated at times. You didn't let it overtake you, though. You were very good at controlling that feeling of overwhelm or that feeling of frustration. You didn't let it take you over entirely. You left yourself time to feel it, to be frustrated, but then you would always go back to it. You found the rest of life to be mundane and daunting. You had no desire to do any other work other than this, but you couldn't really make money at doing this. So you had to take part in the family business. The family business had to do with financing. Your father had been a banker for many, many years and then eventually opened his own bank. It was expected that you would continue that same work. You couldn't think of anything more boring or horrible to do with your life. You had no desire to do it. You avoided it as much as you could until there came a point in time where you had to give in. You didn't really have any other options. You were always looked at in the bank as this quirky fellow, somebody who was not quite in this world, maybe a little bit out of it, which was somewhat true from the perspective that you were always somewhere else. You were hardly ever grounded where you were, mainly because you didn't want to be there. Do you have any questions about that lifetime?
No, but the story, the story is it has remarkable consistency with my lifetime this time.
That has a tendency to happen, definitely. I'm getting the feeling that the heart chakra issue that we saw is also having an impact on this. So once we're able to address that, then hopefully that will allow you to sort of invite your heart into the conversation and help your heart be a part of your creation process.
Yeah.
Because you know how to do it in this lifetime. This is something you know how to do now. In that previous lifetime, you didn't even know how. It was just not something that people really did back then. I mean, especially given the fact that you were a man at that time and it was an older time where people didn't know what it meant to connect to their hearts. You know how to do this now. And so to be able to clear this blockage and then move forward with this, it should help you to really scale leaps and bounds in terms of how you connect to your music.
I mean, that's definitely the problem, is the heart and the throat. And I think it does wax and wane a little bit, obviously, and allow my power to come back, fluctuation of power. But definitely the heart is an issue.
Okay, so let's take a look at the next lifetime they want us to see. So this is a more ancient lifetime. I'm seeing you carve something into stone, like you're trying to write something. I don't know why I'm hearing the words cuneiform. I think I know what that is, but I don't know what that is. I don't remember. You're trying to write this, whatever this is, you're trying to write it very quickly. You're trying to get the message across. There's not enough space on this stone that you're carving. It's something that needs to travel. It needs to get to somebody. You've completed the message. It's going around the edge of the stone on 3 sides. And I'm hearing you say, I hope this message gets to you quickly. So you're not delivering the message. You're sending a messenger to send this message. Somebody who is actually traveling to the city that this needs to go to. You wrap it up in a piece of cloth. You tie it tightly. This message isn't something that needs to be super secure, meaning if somebody else read it, it wouldn't be a huge deal. But just for the sake of privacy, you didn't want this message to be out in the open for anybody to read. This message is being sent to your wife. It is a will of some sort. I mean, less of a will, more of instructions if you were to die. What would happen if you were to die? You were on this journey for a long time. You hadn't intended on being on this journey for as long as you have. You intended on being gone for 2 years. It has now been 6. You have children that were born that are now so much older, and you've never met them. Your oldest you saw before you left. The twins were born after you left. There were matters at hand that needed to be taken care of. The business that you were on that took you away from home for 6 years was incredibly important business. It was helping a great many people. It was helping people in the village that you were from. You were going from city to city, gathering resources and sending them back home. You left with a list of things that you didn't even know existed in the world, but you thought that you would try to find. There were certain herbal medicines that were needed in the city. You also needed a healer of some sort to come to the city, which you did send at one point. You were on a scavenger hunt of sorts to find these things for your city and for your people in your village. You are now in a place where you're stuck. You don't know how to get out. There's fighting all around you. You didn't intend to go this far from home, but you had heard whispers and rumors of some things being available in other cities that you weren't able to get anywhere else. And so you decided to push on and move forward. You thought it was important enough to then be able to send these things back to the city and back to the village. One of the things that you sent to your wife was the indication of where he found each one of these things, whether it was medicines, whether it was resources, whatever it was, you wrote down in this tablet where you found each of these things so they could send somebody else if something happened to you to go and get more of these things, more of these resources. The reason why you sent the tablet as is because you were captured by one of the sides that was fighting this current city that you were in. You tried to explain to them that you're not even from this city, that you don't even understand what this war is about. You don't understand what it's even here for, like why they're even fighting. I'm hearing you say, I'm just a humble man that is looking for help for my village. They ask you where you're from. I hear you saying Damascus. Was that really where he was from? No, he was lying. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Because it didn't seem to line up with his energy and where he was. He decided to make up something because he didn't want to endanger his own city in case they decided to go and retaliate. This is where the throat chakra issue is coming in? Yes. Oh, okay. You liked to sing. You sang when you were traveling, when you were passing time. And so as you were captured here, you started singing a song and it gave you away because the song that you were singing was from your village. And it's not a song that would really ever be sung anywhere else. And one of the soldiers heard it, knew where that song was from because this particular soldier grew up with somebody from your village. So they're asking you where you got this song. And you said, I don't know, I must have just heard it somewhere. I must have just picked it up on my travels. And so they're starting to hone in on where you're from and talking about your accent and about the things you know. You start saying that your village has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't have to do with this war. You don't even know what this war is about. So it wasn't necessarily where you were from that raised the red flag. It was more the fact that you had lied, which indicated that you must be some sort of spy. You tried to plead with them to let them know that you were just a humble man getting resources for your city. You don't want any quarrel with them. You don't want anything to do with what they were doing and to just let you go so you can go home. They made you think that you were going to go home for a brief time. It was maybe a couple of days. And then shortly thereafter, they killed you. The sad thing is that it's not like they really thought you were much of a threat, but they just didn't want to take the chance that if you were a spy, they didn't want to take the chance of releasing you. So they decided to kill you. What this created in you was the throat chakra block that you have is in regards to your voice. You feel like you gave yourself up just from your song. And that had you not sung that song, you would have still been alive, that you would have been able to escape, that you would have been able to get home to your wife and your kids. The one thing that the guides want you to know is that wasn't the case. Even had you not sung that song, they still would have killed you anyway. It was actually part of your soul trajectory in that lifetime anyway, in order to further your soul's lessons. It was part of what you were meant to do in that life. You were not meant to go back to see your family. You were not meant to be in their lives in the later part of their lives. So it is time to release the guilt and the shame that you have surrounding doing something so small and something that was so joyous to you that created your demise. Understanding that it wasn't the song that created your demise. It was something you had signed up for. So I'm going to ask Saint Germain to be with you now to remove any and all energy from this previous lifetime from your throat chakra. Any and all blockages you have regarding your throat chakra, regarding sharing your voice, your song, for fear that it might get you killed. Do you have any questions about that lifetime?
No, I can resonate where some of the themes, how they exist in my life now very much. The writing thing, the healing thing, herbal medicine thing, the leaving my family, the pressure of that call, the importance of that call, and sending back healing or sending back awareness, I guess you could say, of where help is. Healing is available, resources are available, and writing in general. Very consistent themes with things that are happening or things in this lifetime that I'm trying to accomplish.
Right.
Very cool.
All right. So let's take a look at the third lifetime we need to look at. So they're saying to me that this one is going to partially connect to the heart blockage that you have right now. We're going to have to look at another lifetime outside of this group of 4 that's going to address that as well. But this is going to be partially addressing it. I'm trying to tap in just now and I'm hearing, actually physically hearing with my ears, opera singing. There's a woman who lives across the way from me. So she's across the street in the building across the street. And I'm on the 11th floor. So she's probably somewhere in that vicinity because it's almost directly across. And during the summer, she'll come out to her balcony and start singing.
Oh, very cool.
And I think that's her singing now, but it is freezing out right now, like super cold. So I'm actually really surprised that she's out there right now and that I can actually hear her because all of my windows are closed. And it's the first time I've heard her since probably the summer. So I
That's
find it super funny that this is happening during
fun.
this session. Because for a second I was like, oh, I'm hearing opera music. Okay, is this part of the
Yeah,
past life? I'm like, no, wait a minute. No, I'm hearing this in my actual ears.
I have a strong connection to opera singing. Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
I mean, not that I've sang opera, but I have that kind of operatic voice, and I have sang in
Nice.
choir and solo and stuff.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, not professionally, but I like to sing opera.
Lovely. Okay, so here's this other lifetime we're connecting into is a lifetime where you were a performer, but I'm not seeing that you were a performer on stage. You were a performer for the kings. You orchestrated big spectacular events for the kings. Why do you keep on saying the kings like that? Like is it more than one? Did he travel? Like what was the deal there? He did travel. He was well known across the countries. I'm hearing Austria, Germany, France, Spain, Italy.
Italy.
You were well known amongst the kings to put on incredible shows. So not only were you a singer, not only could you play instruments, but you were also a choreographer. You would put all these things together. You were a conductor.
Producer. Yeah, very cool.
Like I said, it wasn't like stage shows, but it was like I see these things happening in the palace rooms. It was like these things were special just for the kings and their court. Like the general public was not allowed to see these.
Oh, I like this. Oh, I resonate with this. Love it. This makes me happy.
So you went from city to city. You worked on multiple things at the same time. You were organizing things. It got to be a little much. You were overwhelmed on a lot of levels because nothing you did was good enough. Even though you were highly sought after and revered, it was like your reputation preceded you, how amazing and incredible you were. And then you would do something. And because of the hype, so to speak, like there's nothing you could have done to make these kings feel like you were the best of the best. Their expectations were so high that there was no way you were going to be able to meet them. Even though you were the best of the best at the time, they still expected more. It's like you were chasing your own ghost, like you were chasing your own reputation, trying to live up to the reputation that you had created for yourself. And it was exhausting. This is part of where your heart closed because you put your literal heart into everything that you did. Like every heartbeat you had living in that lifetime was dedicated to creating something that was beautiful, that was appreciated, that was loved. And for every criticism, you shut your heart down just that little tiny bit more.
Wow, this is Mozart's story, you know.
Is it?
This is young Mozart, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, this is Mozart's story. Austria and traveled around and performed for all the kings and was spectacular, but was also a child, really. Like whatever he channeled well, but he had a reputation that kind of preceded him and people expected more. He was providing channeled stuff, like he was providing this beautiful stuff, and I think he knew where it came from, and so he didn't interfere with it. Like it just flowed, and he was very disappointed that people wouldn't like music from God. There wouldn't be anything more divine like that. He was excited about it himself, hearing it for himself as an audience member, and he was disappointed when anybody wouldn't love and adore this music that came through him. Yeah. And he was childlike, and he was also worked to the bone in a way, trying to please people. He just wanted to please people. He wanted to make people as happy as he was with the music. He ended up quite poor, actually. Money didn't mean very much to him, but I think he did end up somewhat brokenhearted because the music was divine. He was heartbroken from that.
Yeah.
That's very much his story.
That's fascinating. So I wonder if I'm going to ask the guides if this particular person that you were in this lifetime, was it around the same time as Mozart? It was not. It was just before Mozart, like maybe 2 generations before Mozart. Yeah, because when I'm seeing you do this, I'm not seeing you as a child. I'm seeing you as a young man. So probably 26, 27, somewhere around there.
Yeah, there is something heartbreaking when you fall in love with melody, with the beauty of that. And there is something very heartbreaking when it isn't received in the spirit it's given.
Yeah. We're going to go into more of this lifetime as to how things sort of panned out for you. You started getting a little obstinate. Okay, so when the last king complained, Not only did he complain, but he said, why don't you do something like this? And so he basically outlined for you everything that he wanted you to do. You basically said, okay, fine. I'll give you exactly what you're asking for. And so you did. And you went back and you created this thing and you came back and it was hard to listen to. You did everything that he asked you to do. It was just, you did it in a way that was actually offensive to the ears almost. And I'm seeing you just being very like snide about it, really angry. Yeah. And the king was just kind of like, nope, that's not what I asked for. You're like, this is exactly what you asked for.
Could see me doing that. Totally.
The other members of the troupe that you sort of traveled with and that you hired for these entertainments, they were people who were always there and they're like, hey, like we can't do this anymore because we have to live here and you're hiring us to do this and we have to deal with the fallout of this. Either we go back to doing what we were doing before and you take the criticisms, or we're not going to play for you anymore. Basically, you realized you were kind of putting their lives in jeopardy by doing this. So you kind of backed off on that and you went back to doing it the way that you always had. The king still criticized to an extent, but that little stunt that you pulled actually did help. It kind of created this sort of negative press, if you will. It created this like rumor about how you had lost your touch. That was just enough. That was actually exactly what was needed for you to be able to move forward without having as much criticism. Now that you knew this, you decided to start spreading rumors about yourself.
This sounds so much like me.
So like, I'm just hearing you in like you're in a pub or something like that, like after hours, and you're like, people don't know who you are. And you're just like, yeah, I hear that he's gone tone deaf and he doesn't know what he's doing anymore. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. And I'm seeing you listen to some of the musicians in this pub and you're like, you guys are better than that guy ever was. Yeah. So things like that. And you're having a lot of fun with it, actually. So as you went on, you put less and less and less of your heart into the music, even though it did take a toll on you physically because you were so busy all the time. You were always doing something, but it also took a toll on you energetically and spiritually, to the point where you felt almost like you couldn't tap into the divine source energy that you were tapping into before. Like it felt different to you. They wanted to acknowledge that this is part of the reason why your heart is blocked now, but this is not the full reason. This was just a small part of it. Was there anything else that we needed to know about that lifetime? No, not at this time. Okay, so let's move into the fourth lifetime to see what we need to see there. I don't know what this means, but I'm just going to start with what they're showing me. So in this particular lifetime, all I'm hearing you say is that everything I do, it's in the clouds and it's in the earth. And I'm seeing this cycle of up and down between being in the clouds and being in the earth. You were trying to find the balance between manifestation and grounding your manifestation, having your manifestation stay in the ethers, stay in the clouds, so to speak, and then how to ground it into the earth. Everything I do goes from the clouds to the earth. So in that space, you were trying to figure out how to manifest, even though that's not what it was called then. That's not what you studied then. But it is the creation of your own reality that you were really looking at. It has been told in philosophies. It has been sought to be proven by philosophers that what you create in the ethers is what grounds in the earth. You had read some of these studies. You had read some of these books. You had read some of these philosophies and thought that you could prove them. But you thought that you could prove them through writing, through recording your experiences, experimenting. But you realized eventually that it doesn't really work like that, because every time you would try to manifest something, it would come, but it would come in a different form than you thought it would. So it didn't have a direct correlation. Basically, what you wanted to have happen is you wanted to say, I'm manifesting an apple, and then an apple would show up. Whereas what happened in reality was I'm manifesting an apple, and then all of a sudden you would come across an apple tree. Do you see the difference? So it's like you were seeing one thing and saying, okay, I want this to show up as one apple. Like I want one apple to manifest. This is how I'm going to record it. This is how I'm going to prove that this works. And then when that didn't happen, you were disappointed, but then you got a whole apple tree. And you didn't see the significance of that. You didn't notice that that was the bigger manifestation of what you wanted versus the exact thing.
The abundance from the universe.
Exactly. And so you weren't paying attention to that. You were just still focusing on the fact that that apple wasn't there. You were also focusing on where you wanted it to show up. So like you wanted the apple to like appear out of thin air on your desk or something like that. You had these very specific criteria of what you wanted to have happen in order to prove these things. You were very rigid in the way that you were seeing things. Ah, interesting. This is also the lifetime where you get this need to fill in the blanks, making assumptions based on what you already know and not allowing more information to come.
Not listening.
Yeah, it's jumping to conclusions.
You're expecting this thing to present the way you think it should.
Correct. I'm not seeing that this has anything to do with music in this lifetime, because I'm hearing this was your life's work. This is what you were working on your whole life. It's trying to prove this.
Well, it's trying to prove God exists. And missing the apple tree. There's the knowledge that of the existence is there and very, very clear. And the desire to help people see this, that it does exist, but then having a formulated way that I think that would prove it, I guess you could say. That's very much playing it in my life, just to keep the outcome out of the picture. Do the prayer, do the faith and the manifestation, but leave the outcome of how it presents. That's leaving the blanks blank. And it's funny that you had mentioned that, because that was an expression that came to me in my journaling. It's like, oh, make sure you leave some blanks for God to fill in. Otherwise, if you fill in all the blanks, there's no place for God to fit in the co-creation of it. You have to leave space for God to do it, God's part, and you to do your part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It does. And thank you for sharing that, because that is one of the main reasons why they were showing us this particular lifetime too, is because when you were trying to prove this sort of scientifically, what you were trying to do is you were trying to take the faith out of it.
Yeah.
I want to be able to teach people how to do this without having to have faith, without having to connect to God. Because if I can prove that this just works like clockwork and that I just give steps A, B, C, and D, anyone can do it and everybody's going to be great. So you were trying to take the God out of it, actually, in fact. And that really wasn't working.
Make it work more like science. Which is science. It was kind of my background. Well, everybody's background in Western medicine is how we're taught to think, right? The cause and effect, and that's really promoted. And trying to use that kind of logic, that kind of predictability, kind of like a reproduced research project. Do this and this will happen, because that's what society or our culture likes to have as proof. And then, the proof thing, it's like there is an association between proof and evidence that is taking the God thing out of it. It's like you don't have to have proof like that. Not that kind of proof. You have proof in another way that it's a knowing. Like, I know that apple tree is the response from my prayer. And how proof has a lot to do with science, but very little to do with God.
Exactly. And the proof that is necessary with God has a lot to do with our own belief. So oftentimes the universe, our angels, God will give us that proof that we need. But I can almost guarantee you that any proof that you've ever received, because I know that any proof that I've ever received has always been for me and me alone. And so if you ever try to describe that to somebody, like, oh my gosh, like this happened, and can you believe this happened, and this coincidence and that synchronicity and this and this and this, somebody can look at it and say, I can see that, but they don't feel it. They don't feel it the way that you do, right?
I know what you're talking about. And you always sound a little ridiculous when you do try to start when you see the whole thing and how perfect it is, and how much meaning and what all those different symbols mean. And from the day you were like 5 and all these things that kind of converge at once. And when you try to explain that, you often sound kind of crazy anyways.
Well, at the very least, even if you're speaking to somebody who understands, they're not going to get the full spectrum.
No. Yeah. They're not going to get the meaning of all of those things, what they meant to you, and how you've always longed for these things, like, and all of that plays into it. And they're not going to get that convergence at all, that experience of convergence.
Not to sum it up necessarily, but to give you a bigger, wider picture of what they're trying to convey to you. And the message here is very much about not only continuing to connect to your heart as it pertains to the things that are aligned for you, the things that you are guided to do, but then also to make sure that you are leaving room, that you are leaving that space for things to grow, for things to surprise you, for other things to come in. So if you have an orchestra that is filled, all of their chairs with all of the instruments, and you have 7 different instruments that you have never used before and there's no room for them, you're not going to be able to create anything new.
Right.
So you're going to need to have space, not only in your heart, you need to have energetic space. You need to have the openness to be able to allow new things to come in that maybe you had never thought of before. And trust and faith in what you're doing is what you are meant to be doing. So the one thing that we need to do is we need to go into that last lifetime with the heart space clearing. But I do want to tap into a little bit of your soul purpose because I feel like it's going to tie some other things together as well. So give me a second. I'm just going to take a look. Do we need to look at soul origin? We do. So when I look at soul origin, basically what I see is the moment that your soul broke off from divine source energy to be or experience something else. The first thing that I'm seeing that you experienced was being a star. And so it was literally the closest thing to you at the time. And so you basically embodied being this star. The pulsating nature of the star, the movement of the star, the gases, everything around it was like a really beautifully orchestrated symphony to you. This experience that you had as a star, your very, very first experience as a soul outside of the collective energy, if you will, was such a beautiful experience for you. There were so many things that you could just see and feel and hear all around you, being able to experience the universe as it is in its grand orchestration, feeling like just a very small part of it, but being so connected to all of it at the same time. Being part of divine source energy in the collective energy was almost as if it was a softening of the volume of everything that was going on in the universe. And then the second you became a star, it's like the volume got turned up on everything. And you were able to see, hear, and feel and experience everything. And it was exciting to you and you loved it. And so you decided to move from that star to different stars. You went to different stars all over the galaxy. And then from one galaxy to the next. And then from one reality to the next. You never stayed too long in any particular place. You wanted to experience everything that you possibly could. You weren't too particular about incarnating in a body, so to speak, in a human form or other form in other planets. Not right away. You wanted to hear every corner of the universe. You wanted to feel every corner of the universe before you did that. You wanted to know everything that was out there. And being a star was the easiest way to do that because you didn't have to incarnate on a planet, which usually involves much more commitment. It involves much more connection to that planet. Being a star makes you much more nimble. So everything that you bring in with your soul is all of this experience that you had from every single corner of the universe. All the sounds, all the feelings, all the resonances, frequencies. You have it all within your soul signature. There aren't very many souls who have done this on this planet. And therefore, it really makes you uniquely qualified to tune in to everything around you, to be aware of everything that's going on around you. This is why in that last lifetime that we looked at that had you tuning into the bird song, into everything that was going on around you, that's why it was so easy for you to do, because you've had millennia of practice connecting to so many different energies and star systems. You are able to connect to each one of those star systems, even in your human form now. You don't have to do it specifically. You can simply set the intention to connect to the best part of the experience of your soul for any given situation, and it will be there for you. Your soul's purpose is very much about bringing this frequency to this planet. And not only that, but helping people to understand the connection that we all have. So we all have the connection to all of these stars, all of these galaxies, all of these star systems. You know what the sound of a wave is on another planet because it makes a totally different sound on another planet than it does here. You know what it feels like to bask in the sun of another galaxy that has, in fact, 3 suns. These are all things that you've brought with you here. From a practical standpoint, in terms of your human life, this information is not particularly useful, meaning that there's nothing you need to do with this information. Knowing this information simply activates the knowledge of it. So in everything you do, you can be more aware that that is what is coming in. Thank you for that. Do you have any questions about that before we move on?
No, makes sense to me.
Okay, perfect.
All these little themes that, or all these little knowings, things that I do are all representative of what you're talking about.
Incredible. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to tap into now the lifetime where we are going to do the heart clearings. Okay, so the first thing I'm seeing is a little girl. You have ringlets, pigtails, sort of blondish hair. You're wearing a very large dress, something that's actually a bit too large for you, meaning that like the circumference of it is very big for a child the size of you. So you're maybe 4, and this dress is like as wide as you are tall.
That's funny.
You liked it, but it restricted you too much. Like you were walking in a bell. You wanted to be able to run around and play and be a kid. And it's just like this dress restricted you a lot. I'm getting like Romanian vibes going on here. Okay.
What period of time?
They're saying 12th century. So I'm seeing your parents walk with you. You're in a palace of some sort. Long, long hallways. And I'm seeing your parents pick you up, one on either side of your hand, picking you up. And actually you are like swinging like a bell. It's really cute. That part you really enjoyed. You had a lot of fun with that. There was like a time to be silly. And then the second you crossed a threshold into a particular part of the palace, like you had to be serious. So it was like your parents had a period of time where you could be happy and joking and having fun. And then the second you crossed this one threshold, it was like, that's it. All smiles had to be gone. All happiness had to go away. Like all complete seriousness. You never understood it. You thought it was really dumb. And then like your dad would turn into this like really authoritative figure. He would turn into this like very stern figure. And then that was like when you crossed that threshold, when you crossed that doorway. And then when you went back to the other side into the where you would be able to let go, he was the kindest, nicest man you had ever known. It was like you were living these 2 lives, and your parents were doing the same. The perception of them needed to be exactly what it was. They couldn't know that you and your parents were weak in any way. All right, so we're fast forwarding to you're 13 now. It is very well established that any sort of happiness or joy is for private time only. You needed to hide your heart from anyone. Any outside observers had to see you as somebody who was very stoic and very stern, unfeeling. It really started taking a toll on you because you started to learn how to be stoic all the time and stopped actually playing and stopped actually being able to connect to that joyful nature that you had when you were a kid. So you were put together with a boy who was about the same age as you. It was meant to create an engagement between the two of you. You were to get married in 2 years at the age of 14. So the very first time that this boy crossed the threshold with you into the main part of the palace where you would just sort of let loose and be able to connect to your parents and that sort of thing, you expected that he would let down his, stoic nature and be kind of real and heart-centered and all of those things. And he wasn't. And you were really shocked by this. You were really shocked that he wasn't letting his guard down. And so you're telling him, you're like, well, we don't have to act like that in here. Like we can be ourselves in here. And he's like, what are you talking about? I am being myself. And that's when you knew that this was going to be a very long road for you, because you were now engaged to somebody who literally didn't even know how to be in his heart space. He didn't know how to feel. He didn't know how to have fun. He didn't know how to do anything but just be what he was groomed to be. It was like he was a robot. He was like on autopilot. There was nothing there. There was no feeling, no personality. Like there was nothing. And that just, it made you die a little inside to know that you had to spend your life with this man. Because even though you had lost some of your youthful playfulness, but you still had this heart connection with yourself and with your parents. And I'm seeing him watch you and your parents sort of carry on and joke around and have fun. And he's saying like, this is not acceptable behavior. Why are you behaving this way? And he's saying, I assure you, when I'm in power, this will never happen. Your parents are saying that he will change his way of being once he gets older. And that never did happen. Having to spend all day, every day with somebody as uncaring and unfeeling as him basically broke your heart. When your parents died, there was nothing else that you had. You didn't have anybody else that you were close to that way. You had siblings, but you were not close to them. They were raised in different parts of the country. Eventually, you had no choice but to just close off your heart entirely. You had to, because you had to stomach being with this person, being with this man that you ended up marrying. It was really hard for you to do so. It was hard for you to do your, what you called wifely duties. It was hard for you to even imagine touching him. Everything was mechanical with him, everything. There was no passion, there was no love, there was no anything. You can count on one hand how many times he kissed you the entire time he was married to you. So what I'm seeing is like there's a trajectory of your heart from like being a little girl to having like lots and lots of connection to your heart space to all the way to the end of your life being, it's like your heart almost turned to stone. You just learned to completely disassociate from your heart entirely. You had to, it was out of survival. And also turn a blind eye to the things that your husband was doing because the things that he did to other people were horrible and you couldn't say anything and you couldn't do anything. All you could do was sit back and watch. Is there anything else we need to know about that lifetime? Yes. She drew the boundaries around her own heart on her own. The outside circumstances certainly contributed to her drawing the boundaries around her heart, but she decided to do it on her own because she had to. She felt like she wouldn't survive otherwise. So when it comes to her heart chakra clearing, it is her that needs to do the clearing. You need to clear it yourself with this knowledge that you put this barrier around your heart to begin with. Understanding that you can remove this barrier anytime you want. Understanding that you can feel everything that you are meant to feel, both wanted and unwanted emotions. Are you ready to release this blockage?
Yes.
So I'm going to allow some grace around your heart space with a beautiful bubble of divine light protection. So imagine this bubble of protection is just like a little malleable bubble that will eventually dissipate over the course of maybe the next 48 hours. This protection is simply there just to help. Now that you've cleared the heart chakra entirely of this blockage, it almost feels like it's raw. It feels like it's really raw and open. It's almost like putting on a Band-Aid a little bit just to help it heal a little bit while it's in recovery. Okay, so how do you feel?
Excellent.
Wonderful. So good to hear.
Excellent. Very helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I'm very light.
Oh, good.
Nothing feeling heavy about any of this. Just feeling kind of truthful and light. It's just connecting with the truth again.
Good. Amazing. All right. So we are going to close the Akashic Records. I would like to thank Akula, my Akashic guide, for being here. Thank you to Archangel Metatron and Archangel Sandalphon for being here as well and allowing us access to the Akashic Records. The records are closed. The records are closed. The records are closed. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one little thing to tell you, Annette.
Yeah, please do.
I actually make song duets on my harp with bird songs.
No.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And have them orchestrated, yeah. So I have actually listened to bird songs, bird vocalizations, and human voice vocalizations, and I compose music from that. So it's very cool.
That's so awesome. I love that.
Like there's so many of those kind of things that you don't know about, but it's like totally unique and totally you picked up on or it's out there. Yeah, very cool.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, I'm so happy. And thank you for telling me that. I want to thank Taylor for showing her vulnerability and being open to sharing her story with us. There are 3 major themes that came up during this session that I wanted to address. The first theme is living up to your own success. The second is testing the universe and trying to find proof of God. The third theme is what happens when you feel like you might be a famous person in a previous life. So I'm going to tackle the first one, which is living up to your own success. Oftentimes we have this fear of being successful because when we are successful, what do we have to do? We have to maintain it. One of the things that we were talking about in this session was the reputation that she was trying to live up to in this previous lifetime, the reputation that had preceded her. So everywhere that she went, every king that she performed for was thinking that she would be this absolutely perfect, incredible musician. And while that was the case, the expectation creates that disparity in what the experience is. So there are 2 things that happen within this space. The first thing is creating expectations, and that is of yourself and also taking on the expectations of others. And then also being in a space of fear to be able to live up to those expectations. So the first step in getting out of that fear and integrating that fear is to first remove the expectations that you have on yourself. And a lot of times that can be the best first step you can make. It can also be the hardest because first you have to identify where those expectations are coming from. Are those expectations coming from society? Are they coming from the way that you were raised? Are they coming from yourself? Have you placed these expectations on yourself? One of the beautiful things about being in the flow of the universe is to be in a space of allowing what is to come. And if you are already planning out A, B, C, D, all the way through Z, we've talked about this before, it leaves very little room for the universe to step in and give you something just deliciously beautiful. So how do you move past that? So you can set the intention to accomplish something. You can set the intention of feeling a certain way, of doing a certain thing. So let's say in Taylor's example, she is wanting to incorporate her music more into her life, into her professional life. So then you would just simply set the intention that that is going to happen without the expectation that it is going to come in a certain way. I've had to deal with this in a lot of respects in terms of my own business. When you have an expectation that you are going to, let's say, be on a particular podcast, or you are going to be a particular author, or you're going to have great success in a particular way, you might end up being disappointed because it may not come in that particular way. Your success might come in a completely different way than you even thought of. So that is the first step, removing the expectation of what you feel must happen in order for you to have your success. And then the other aspect of that is not letting others' expectations lead you. Now, a really, really good example of this would be social media. I have a very, very dear friend who is on social media, and she just exploded in terms of her social media presence. And she got thousands and tens and thousands of followers pretty much within a couple of months. She had been working really hard by making videos literally every day in order to achieve that. But then once she achieved it, once she got what she wanted, she started realizing that she needed to take a break. She needed to not continue in the way that she had because she was starting to burn out. And so that's where the expectations of others cannot drive how you move forward. And by expectations of others, I mean not only the public, but also the algorithm, what you feel like you must do in order to be successful. And so she realized that she needed to take a break, that she needed to step away from the social media for a while to basically focus on her family, the other parts of her life, everything else that she needed to do. So it is about finding that balance and understanding that if you have to take a step back from your success for a brief period of time in order to find your balance, that is okay. Your success is not going to go away. It might shift and change and it might go in a different direction, but you're never going to be able to keep absolutely everyone happy. And so I did the same thing with this podcast. I needed to take a few months break in order to create this season, as well as to take some time for myself, for my own soul growth, for my own education, for my own three-dimensional life, to go have fun and do the things that I needed to do. Oftentimes people have the expectation, well, you're going to put out content every week, you should continue to do so without break. And they may not be saying that directly, and they may not be thinking that directly, but that is the expectation. So in that respect, you can manage expectations. So that's why I have seasons, so to speak. Now, do I really need to have seasons on this podcast? No. I could theoretically just continue to make episodes and then take a break whenever I want to. But creating a season allows me to manage that expectation to say that when the season is over, there's going to be a couple month break, and then you can look forward to the next season. This happens all the time with Netflix shows and Disney Plus shows, any of the streaming services you use. So this is no different. It's about taking the break to be able to really pay attention to where you are going, how grounded you are, checking in with yourself, making sure you're doing your daily practices if you need to. The other aspect of this is defining what success is to you. In this session, Taylor's previous version of herself was creating beautiful programs of music and theater and design and all of it.
And it was done because that was what was in her heart. She wasn't necessarily doing it for the kings. She was, because that was the whole purpose of the job, so to speak, but she was doing it more for herself and for her heart, to be able to create something that she could give to somebody else, that she could give to the kings to be able to enjoy. So from that perspective, it is a reciprocal energy of give and take. She was being paid for a service. The service was created, and that energetic balance happens. When she started getting really irritated at the criticisms that the kings had, that's when she started to not enjoy what she was doing. She started to not feel like it was aligned with where her heart was. That is something you do have to continue to check in with yourself about. So even if something is giving you a lot of money or a lot of business, you have to connect with the idea of, okay, why is this making me unhappy at this point? And for Taylor's specific situation, nothing had really changed except for the gossip and the chatter of the outside world. The quality of her work was still the same. She still did an amazing job, but yet the kings were a little bit more disappointed, or they didn't feel it was as good as it had been in the past. What I want you to understand is that does not matter. The outside opinions of people do not matter in that respect. What matters is how you feel in your heart when you're creating whatever it is you're creating. So if you feel you've created something that is really powerful and really beautiful, and somebody else perceives it as something that is lackluster, that is not your issue. That is not your problem to fix. That is simply their subjective opinion. And it is about being able to take a step back and not take that criticism on. Now, we see this all the time with celebrities and social media and everything that surrounds the culture of, well, this person did that and that person did this and this person is no longer popular. And it's a huge problem in the sense that this is not connecting to the heart of the person or the celebrity. This is simply external judgment, external expectations, and external judgment of whether or not that person is meeting those outside expectations that have literally nothing to do with their being, with their person, and with their soul. So removing the expectations of yourself, if they are unrealistic, and trying to find ways to cope with the expectations of others and what you can do to step out of the energy of those expectations of others. One of the things that you can do to remove yourself from those expectations of others is to simply set boundaries and state what you intend to do regardless of what somebody else expects of you. And if somebody is expecting something of you that you certainly cannot deliver, then you need to state that very clearly. So we're going to talk about the fear for a moment. The fear of not being able to achieve the things that you want to achieve. And then when you do achieve them, now what? What happens then? What do you achieve next? What do you manifest next? What do you create? What if it's not as good as the last thing you created? What if it's not as successful as the last thing you did? Does any of that matter? That is what you need to go within and ask yourself. I can use this example, and this is something that I try to connect with on a regular basis. Whether this podcast reaches one person or 5,000 people, the impact is the same. If that one person is listening to this podcast and needed to hear this message and it changed the course of their life, or it made them think about something that they haven't thought about before, to me, that is success. If 5,000 people do the same thing, that is also success. I would never say that if only one person listens to this podcast, that it would be a waste of time, because it's not. You're always going to be in a space of worry if you're constantly trying to gauge your success on other people and what their responses are to what you're creating. Sometimes people measure success in money, and that can certainly be done. Can you identify a place in your life where you're saying that I am not successful because I am not making enough money? But let's say you're successful in other ways. Let's say you are a fantastic father or a wonderful friend, and that is something you really excel at, but maybe you don't have the monetary abundance just yet. You need to focus on the successes that you do have You need to focus on amplifying that energy of those successes. And it's not about continually chasing that success, but it is about turning towards that success and saying, you know what? This makes me feel really great. I love doing this. This is something that really aligns me with my soul. And what if that thing does not make you money at this moment? It's okay. It doesn't necessarily have to make you money at this moment. If you are, let's say, in a job right now that you don't necessarily like, but it brings enough money to allow you to survive, but then you have this desire and this dream to be successful in some other way. And then all of those fears and those judgments and those expectations and everything else starts coming in. Well, it's an expectation that I have to stay in this job, or it's an expectation that I make this much money, or it's an expectation that I be this person. So you can see how the trap can get really, really deep in these expectations that you put on yourself and others as it pertains to being fearful of your own success. And then there's the aspect of when you do get to that success, what are people going to think? Are they going to be angry with me? Because you'd be surprised. Some people do get angry at other people's success because they're either jealous or they're fearful that they're not going to be the same person anymore. They're not going to be able to live up to that person anymore. And it's okay, because that's their journey. You don't have to worry about what their reaction is going to be. I want you to connect to all of these aspects as to how it pertains to your own life and what success means for you. And are you holding yourself back? Are you in a space of making yourself small because of expectations? Are you in a huge successful moment right now and you're afraid you're going to lose it? And what can you do with that energy? You can let all of it go. Let it go. And just connect back into your soul and know that you are being guided in every way that you need to. Now, this is a really good segue to the proof that the universe is here for you. Proof of God, if you will. I have done this many times throughout the course of my spiritual journey. I can tell you that. I have thrown out all kinds of little tests for the universe. If this happens, then I'll trust. If that happens, then I'll believe. If this happens, then I'll have faith. And I can tell you that that doesn't necessarily work very well. What does work really well, though, is that at times when you have the least amount of faith, the universe, God, will step in and help and show you the proof that you need. You'll see the signs, you'll see the synchronicities, you'll see how everything starts to come together in this beautifully perfect way. I will give you an example for something very recent in my life. I had met a guy last year sometime here in Paris. He was American. He was just visiting. And we started talking. There was some interest there. And we connected for a couple of months over the phone after he had left Paris. And then we just sort of trailed off because, distance and everything else. And that's fine. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't anything serious. There wasn't anything super major going on there. We just lost touch, if you will. So fast forward to recently, just before the Paris Olympics here, and this person contacts me and says, "Hey, I'm in town." And wouldn't you know it, that I was actually traveling the same amount of time that he was going to be here. So I was leaving basically the same day he was arriving, and I was going to be gone for a month. I was going to be down in Spain cat sitting for some friends. And the funny part is that I wasn't originally supposed to be there for a full month. I was only supposed to be there for 3 weeks. So technically, prior to all of this being orchestrated by the universe, I would have been able to maybe spend a week with this person here in Paris. But about 4 weeks before this all happened, my friends had messaged me and said, "Hey, do you want to come here about a week early?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." I found it really amusing that the universe orchestrated that I was going to be leaving around this exact same time that he was arriving into Paris. And I was returning to Paris literally the day before he left Paris. And so what did that say to me? Most people might be frustrated that, that didn't work out. But that said to me that the universe was being very, very clear that this was not somebody that I was meant to be in a romantic connection with of some sort. Could things have unfolded differently? Certainly. He could have come to visit me in Spain. I could have tried to change my plans in some way. But you know what? That's where you're starting to push against the universe. So if the universe sends you a message that clear, you have to listen. You have to listen and say, okay, I will just go with the flow. So that's exactly what I did. But that's one of those moments where it's undeniable, at least to me, it's undeniable that that was divinely orchestrated because the timing of it was just too perfect. Everything was just too perfect for things not to have been orchestrated. I have hundreds and hundreds of other stories that are like this that have happened throughout my life. And the problem with these types of stories, even as I'm telling you this story right now, you might be thinking, well, I don't know if that's necessarily an orchestration, like that was just bad timing. Well, you could say that, sure. But I know in my heart, as I'm connecting into my intuition, that the universe is basically keeping me sort of preserved, for a lack of a better word, for something better that's going to come along, for somebody better who's going to be more aligned with who I am in terms of moving forward in a divine romantic connection. I find that incredibly comforting, in fact, in a lot of ways. Whereas some people might look at that as, feeling rejected almost by the universe, that the universe is putting blocks in their way. So it's all about your perception as well in terms of that. So I want you to really look within and ask yourself, where has the universe given you proof and signs that your spirit team, that your angels, that your guides, that your higher self, that God is always there for you and is always orchestrating things the way that it needs to be orchestrated in order for you to be on your highest timeline? Now, will there come a time when, for example, through the session that I had with Taylor, the past life version of her was trying to quantify the existence of God and of manifestation. And will that be able to be quantified at some point? I truly believe it will be. I do believe that it will happen at some point. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I do know that science as well as spirituality is eventually going to kind of merge together, and maybe it will be able to be quantified. But I guess the question is, does it need to be? In my opinion, I don't think it needs to be because it's very much about an individual experience. So all of my experiences that I've had that prove my faith, they're things that I know intrinsically in my heart. It's very hard to describe it to somebody else, the feeling that you have when you have these experiences. So each person is going to experience it differently. So do you need the proof? If you do, ask the universe. Ask the universe, ask your angels, ask them for help. Say, I am really losing my faith right now. I need proof that you're out there and that you're helping me right now. And they'll give it to you. You need to pay attention though. You need to pay attention to those places where they are helping you out. So the last subject I want to tackle, and this is very brief, is the aspect of people feeling or thinking that they are famous figures in history. I can tell you in the years that I've been doing Akashic Record sessions, I have come across a couple of, I don't want to say famous people, but people in history that are known, if you will. But it's only been a couple out of all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions that I've done. It hasn't been a lot. Now, it makes sense in terms of how many people are known in history versus how many people lived throughout history, that ratio would be low in terms of being a famous person or being somebody who is known in history. Does that mean that you can't connect to that person? Not at all. So for example, Taylor might feel incredibly connected to Mozart. It doesn't necessarily mean that she was Mozart in a previous lifetime, but it means that she has some sort of connection to him. So it's possible she knew of him in a particular life. So maybe not in the lifetimes that we covered in this session, but maybe in subsequent lifetimes that we did not cover, maybe she knew him. Maybe there were times when their paths had crossed. So those are things that you don't know. And oftentimes that's not information that the guides will really tell me willingly because it's just a bit of interesting information. It's not particularly helpful. Unless it is something that will help propel you forward on your soul journey, they're not really going to share that information. Does it really matter if you are Cleopatra? Which, by the way, I have a lot of people asking about Cleopatra, which I find very fascinating because when you connect into Cleopatra's energy, it is an energy that I think a lot of people would want to be in. So I think that's why a lot of people connect with her. It's not necessarily that all these people were Cleopatra in a previous lifetime. It just means that they like to connect to the energy of who she was. So I don't want to burst anybody's bubble if you really truly believe that you were a famous figure in the past. It's just that I want to let you know that just because you feel that way doesn't mean that you necessarily are. That is something that you definitely need to dive into the records to see and to know and to feel if you were in fact that person. I want to thank you again for joining me this week. I hope you have a magical, magical post full moon eclipse, and I will speak to you next week.
If you're enjoying this podcast, I really would appreciate it if you would give it a like, a thumbs up, wherever you happen to be listening. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. And if you need to get a hold of me, you can certainly reach me on my website at infinitesoullove.com. You can also reach me on all social media at infinitesoullove1111. That's on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. You can find this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Spotify, Apple, Pocket Casts, anything that you use to listen to podcasts, you can find the Akashic Recordings. Thank you so much, and don't forget to join us next week.